old school paper.
Hi, Mike. I was just waiting on a couple of folks to join, so we're here. Yeah, well, that was my very first, most basic attempt at getting started, just finding out shells.
Well, it's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I think there are other ways that we have to manage some of these things, because I don't think those they're more I haven't read them in a while. They're more detailed than I remembered. Okay, let's go on key. All right, it is 6:02. Did we hear from Patty at all?
I haven't heard from her one way or the other, so.
Okay. Well, we have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and do, even though this is the work session, I'm going to go ahead and open our work session at 6:02. And let's get right into the Idaho Springs Cemetery sign refurbishment replacement.
Sure. So this was discussed last week at City Council. It was, as the report from Paul Crane suggested, hit by a truck and now is in need of repair. I think at minimum, it sounds like it needs new posts. At maximum, we would do just a brand new sign. So there's kind of three tiers of work. One would be keep the same sign. He said he had to modify it slightly to get new brackets. Number two would be keep the sign, but reface it and maybe put a year of when the cemetery was founded. And number three would be a brand new sign, like the ones that were shown in that packet. And I wanted to bring this here just to kind of first get a sense of, is this something that Hprc wants to review, whether it's an official COA or whether it's just a discussion. And then the second thing was, I couldn't find pictures. I looked for about 2 hours today. I couldn't find any pictures or things that showed when the sign was maybe erected to see if it was 50 years or older. But
what are your thoughts, Shannon?
Should be a COA or not? Well, it's one of our properties, right? So probably it should be.
Well, I will say yes, because I like being able to have eyeballs on everything. But if you look at what we have now, we have the small projects, and signs are, and that
yes, that small projects exemption.
Oh right, they go to city council for us. I remember hearing that about signs before.
Well, this is the Hprc has developed a list of small projects appropriate on a required review by the building official rather than a review by Hprc, except as noted. This list, okay, they are the following, and with signs, all signs that meet the requirements of Chapter 20 may be approved by the city's authorized agent. Here's my problem with that: we have the city building official and we have the city's authorized agent. And I've made notes of this in several places. I need, for my comfort level of this, I need to see who is the city's building agent or the city building official or the authorized agent. We don't have a building official.
Right.
And we don't have an authorized agent. So we need to authorize an agent. And what my suggestion would be to make it go through the city planner, and either the chair or the vice chair sign off on the city planners, discuss with the city planner, sign off on the recommendation, kind of like we do now with the COA. So there's not just one person making a decision.
That would be good.
I don't think we have to have the whole committee to replace this sign.
Yeah.
But I think and since we don't, and you guys tell me what you think, we don't have a building official. I think the city's designated agent or authorized agent for these issues, and you have to tell me how you feel about that, should be you.
I think that makes sense. I think elsewhere in the code, when there's administrative decisions, it just says city administrator or there.
In a number of places, it says city is authorized agent or building official.
Within the
design guidelines.
Yes.
So
for subdivision, let's say, or platament, technically it says it'd just be would be it says the city administrator has the authority to make the decision or their agents. essentially something to that effect, which then allows, I guess, for more flexibility, but the problem with that, of course, is Andy, or whoever the city administrator was, right?
I would prefer city planner because the city planner is going to have a sense, like, and it's not for everything, like, I don't care about the building codes necessarily, but this is, if we're looking at the historic preservation aspect of these things, I want someone, like, I feel like we would not be doing our due diligence if we didn't have somebody that has that understanding of what we're looking at. So I think you and then either the chair or the vice chair, like that way it allows you to say, okay, here's my assessment, and you get whoever happens to be available.
Right.
Mike, what do you think?
I agree with the discussion.
I like the idea of oversight, and I like the idea of a designated official, since we don't have,
Yeah, and it wouldn't be an onerous process
mm-mm,
because sign code already requires that you get a sign permit and wonder, city clerk, whoever's, acting in that role refers it, is supposed to refer to planning because signs are in our code.
okay,
So in that sense, technically, should be done either way, but clarifying that I think is important, especially on one of these where it may or may not need a building permit, I guess.
I don't think it doesn't seem like it needs a building permit, it seems like it falls under our small project.
Yeah.
And it's a historic property, if we can't determine that it's a 50-year, I mean, I know it's at least 30 to 40, because when we talked about it at city council, Jeremy said it had been there as long as he could remember. I think he's in his 40s, mid-40s.
Yeah, sure.
So it probably does meet the 50-year. So in that case, what is our, like, how do we handle that?
Well, I suppose it still allows, would you think of a sign? Like the sign, I think probably still falls under the small project exemption either way, even if it was over 50 years, unless the sign itself has thus become the historic resource, right? Because then maybe, when I was at the CPI conference.
Was that recently?
One in January, they had the discussion about the sign that's on top of what's it, the paint sign in Denver. Talked about replacing the neon lighting, the glass neon lights with the LED lights. It's incredibly controversial with their HPRC. And so that had gained status as a monument in its own sense, whereas I don't know that our cemetery sign necessarily has. But
How do you feel, Shannon? What do you think? Like, when you look at his 3 designs that he put in here, what do you think?
I like the water wheel, it's a part of our city hall sign, it's a part of a lot of other stuff, but I also like the sort of more scripty font, so I like the idea of combining those two together, where it's the water wheel motif in the background with the scroll, the more scripty scroll over it.
Mike, what do you think?
I like the water wheel version. The one concern I have is that because the water wheel is in black and the lettering is in yellow, it might make it difficult for people to read the lettering.
well, and I know at this stage, these are kind of mock-ups, I guess, from Paul, not necessarily like this is what we want to do. So I anticipate, I think city council felt somewhat similarly, like with design, with water wheel and all of that. I'm guessing that he used these colorings because this is what the existing sign is. Sure.
Making the font darker and the water wheel more of like a brown, like matching the.
So I'm gonna
Post
say, and I said this in council too, I love the water wheel sign. I love that one. I think that's really, but I also like the simplicity of the Idaho Springs Cemetery original sign.
Yeah.
I would be inclined, because we can't tell when this one was built. Like, even though I feel it probably meets the 50-year rule. I also know that Paul said that this sign was, it was challenged because it's been hit more than once. Well, I think they're doing some work to mitigate that though, like they're putting rocks.
Yeah, what
Around
they
that
wanna
driveway.
do, if you can visualize the sign right now, they put a few boulders kind of around it, so people could still pull in, turn around, but in order, like, before you hit the sign. you have to walk first.
Well, it was a big trailer or something that hit it, like
So
it
it
was.
extends way beyond the wheels, it could, dash it.
I would be willing to, so this would be my thought, if he cannot repair the sign, I would actually like to see if he can repair the sign. If he can repair the sign, I don't think there needs to be a year attached to it. I think we can make a separate sign down below that has a year because the year was not part of this.
Like a little kind of.
Well, he's
swinging
very
one.
adamant that he would like to have the year on there. He's like, I put in the year. I'm like, that's not your decision to make. That's actually falls under somebody else's purview. But I think he's right in that having the year and the year of the original cemetery that was over here before it got flooded. Because that was the original year the Idaho Springs Cemetery was founded.
Right.
But if you can't fix it, I would like to see the Idaho Springs Cemetery water wheel sign, but not with black, like with brown. Like I like the brown and the yellow. I think sticking, and so if you could do the water wheel in like sign, and I like the color of the sign, but then the water wheel maybe in a brown that matches like the posts.
Make it easier to read too.
Yes, yes.
The other thing about the water wheel is that's something that is pretty unique to Idaho Springs. I don't remember, I've traveled a lot of the state and I don't remember any other town using a water wheel as part of their identity.
Yeah, we use it quite a bit, it's on a lot of different organizations throughout town, so. But I would like to see if we can repair the sign, and if we can repair the sign, put a sign underneath it with the year.
It makes a lot of sense if you have two posts, you have the big sign that says Idaho Springs Cemetery, and then below it, a different sign that is attached to those posts as well, it says established.
Because I actually really like that I like the simplicity of it. If you can't, I'm all for that. Well, I don't know what that water wheel, everybody has had that response where we're like, oh, we all like that.
It's the most visible feature.
Okay, and I guess we would say, so I think where we fall otherwise on this, which is kind of beneficial for two reasons. One, the determination about it being a small project exemption regardless, but two, that's something that we may want to require changes to the guidelines just broadly.
Yes.
Because it does say upon a required review by the building official. Instead, we could say upon a required review by the city.
Chair or vice chair, yes. Like I would like to see that. But I think the rules as they go, I think that it does fall under small projects. What do you think, Mike?
No, I agree.
Okay.
Perfect, okay, well, I don't really know what the next.
I know Paul wanted to talk to Lou as well, but again, Lou is not the deciding factor. Like this body is the deciding factor.
Well, and I think once sites and facilities is up and running and is authorized and has memberships and it's filled, that would obviously.
Might
You think
potentially
he
have
would
3 members
start
right now.
with, you'd start with
Yeah,
them,
that's one.
they would say, this looks like it could be replaced, or this couldn't be replaced, and then he'd wanna quickly come to me and ask, hey, would this be a small project? Say, yeah, it's a small project, but
But I think with sites and facilities, just to segue a bit, I think with sites and facilities, when they go around and do their site tours, here are the things that look like they're about to fall apart or whatever. What falls under small projects? What do we have to do COAs?
right, that's true, and I mean, the sign obviously is more like, got hit by a car, it's not like a truck. It wasn't necessarily in need of maintenance generally until May 30th when it got hit. So then you say, does that qualify as an emergency? Which it's not, like, certainly not, because the sign on the ground.
Yeah, but
is
if we
not
already had this
emergency,
in process, it would have, May 30th, it got hit, that was a Thursday. And by Monday, you could have been consulted, you could have consulted Mike or I, and we would have been.
Right. Because you almost don't even need to take like a sign replacement to council other than for.
I think
If
taking it
there's
to
funds.
council was a smart idea in that, like, but I think it's because it's not clear how this is supposed to happen, and I think
Right.
with this redoing of the design guidelines, like, we need to make that very clear. So does that give you everything you need for the
I think
sign?
so. That's great, yeah. I'll pass that along to everyone. That helps me with it.
I would ask if the sign is not repairable, can we please bring the sign into the city hall? Like, can we please have the sign?
Because there's something that we can use it for. Even if it can't be placed outside, you can still.
We have a collection of signs that I think like would be wonderful, like in here, we have a really wonderful collection of signs. Let's put the collection of signs on a wall or something,
Yeah,
you know, that reflects some of our history.
yeah, that would
I know that
be-
they're hanging out downstairs.
Right, John has a lot of them in his office.
John does.
But yeah, it'd be nice once they reconfigure the interior of City Hall to incorporate that as a design element. That would be really cool.
Well, old signs are really wonderful anyway. Okay, so if we're good there, we are moving on to next for the design guideline review. Is there any way you'd like to start with this, or?
Well, I suppose just as a brief introduction, we talked about this at council, just to really as an FYI item in a lot of ways, but also to gather some additional ideas. And the big ones that came up were consideration of safety improvements like fire safety, building code updates, and things like that, which Jeremy had mentioned.
May I interject and ask though, if that is interior, is that where our purview lies?
Well, I think where it could play into exterior is like maybe they say we want to improve firewall ratings and things like that between buildings, but that probably doesn't make sense downtown, given that it's interior walls. But maybe they do something with, I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure there's treatments on the outside that would make it.
There were four other communities mentioned in the memo that went to city council, and I've added those to the chart. And two of the communities actually do have a guideline that deals with changes in building codes. So we would be able to look at language for that, since two communities have that.
Is that the new system and code compliance in existing buildings?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I highlighted that as one, as I would like to see us doing that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see, some other things that kind of, everything else we had talked about, which is what in my report about how-to guides, strengthening language, clarifying language, but the other thing, talking to John after the meeting, was about like adaptive reuse of buildings and kind of what's happening in some of the buildings downtown now, and whether we want to strengthen language for that to either allow more of that or not allow it because of the concern which has been raised in Denver about people just letting their building rot away into nothing.
Oh, is that the mothballing? I saw that mentioned.
Yeah.
As a figure, that's what it meant.
Yeah,
Well, how do we do this for number two, the adaptive reuse of buildings? How do we do this for the exterior buildings as a way to incorporate the idea that a lot of our historic buildings share walls? So do we strengthen language where if you have a shared wall, what you do in the interior does affect your neighbor's exterior wall?
right.
So maybe there, like, that's where we tighten up some of our downtown stuff.
Yeah, because, and that may not be a guidelines thing, it may be building, or not building code, but like zoning codes, or planning and zoning, our municipal code, to require, some sort of review that looks into that interplay.
I think we should, because I worry about that.
See, and Denver has an adaptive reuse guideline section. So we'd be able to look at that.
And then the other thing that I wanted to mention that we haven't talked about previously necessarily is whether we want to revisit the use table in the municipal code and see whether there's any uses that maybe really aren't appropriate downtown, but were wrapped into that zoning code when we created the HD district in 2018.
I think the most extensive, like the one that I would find the most destructive is manufacturing, but it's very light manufacturing.
Right.
And how do we define light manufacturing?
Have a good definition for it.
So maybe that needs to be,
It may not be a large focus, but we're making changes that.
I do think it's an important one though, because if you think about it, we're gonna have, because I have some questions about the district itself based on the map that you in here. What do they call light manufacturing?
Finishing and assembly from previously prepared materials of finished products or parts, including processing, fabrication, assembly, treatment, packaging, etc. Further, light manufacturing shall mean uses such as the manufacture of electronic instruments, pharmaceuticals, research and science labs, or the like, shall not include mining, chemical, rubber refining, or primary metal or wood industries, as opposed to heavy, which like raw material manufacturing.
Okay. I also saw where you have the tax credit. Clarifying the role of HPRC. My understanding, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they had to go through HPRC in order to apply for the tax credits.
There's two tax credit programs. There's one operated by the federal government and one operated by the state, and they do have different rules. I think for the federal tax credit, a community can choose to either deal directly with the federal government or it can do it by doing it through the state.
Because I know there's one, I went to one at the CPI conference where the state didn't need HPRC to sign off, but the feds did.
Yeah, I was reading the History Colorado's handbook for CLGs. That's what got me thinking of it. And it says for federal tax credits, CLGs work with local owners of commercial properties to complete and submit nominations to the National Register to provide eligibility for the federal tax credit. And it says for the state, a CLG may opt to be the reviewing entity for Colorado State Historic Preservation Income Tax Credit for residential properties. All tax credits for income producing properties are reviewed by SHPA. And so what I take from this, I actually reached out to Lindsay from History Colorado just this morning. I didn't have time yesterday, or I reached out earlier, but just to make sure that I'm understanding all that. But it seems like for the state tax credit, you're applying for that and you're a commercial business would. But if you're residential or if you want the federal, you would go through us.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't think they had to go through us for the state. But I think that needs to be very clear in our guidelines, you know, about how, like, I think that needs to be one of the how-tos.
Right, yeah, like how to get.
Like here we state it, and then here's a link about how you apply for the state, how you apply, here's what you're applying for, how do you apply for it, how do you apply for the federal?
Yeah.
If you're income producing or if you're residential, I think that needs to be.
Right, because I know there's a lot of businesses interested in tax credits at the moment, eventually the Opera House building, eventually the Hot Spring, eventually the Club Hotel, and knowing clearly where we can have a say in how that works, I think it's good for our perspective as well as theirs.
Well, I think it's also incentive to work with us in an appropriate fashion.
A good project, certainly.
Hey, Mike, I want to tell you, thank you for your chart that you provided. This was really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not dug into it too deeply quite yet, in that I haven't fully read all of the guidelines from those communities, but.
I haven't read the guidelines, but I went through, this is just where I went through and I highlighted, and I'll send this to you, so you'll have this too. The things that we don't have that I think we should, appropriateness of use, site relationship, third stories on storefronts and building and roof form, preservation of commercial storefronts, new storefront character, new building materials and roof materials. And I'm just looking, I'm trying to think about the things that we have seen or questions that I've gotten. Replacement or substitution of original features, existing alterations on historic buildings, new system and code compliance in existing buildings, and that's under alterations and replacement. And then under devices and equipment, new system and code compliance in existing buildings. Rock walls, cut and fill retaining walls. I think that rock walls is going to be more of a challenge as we move forward, because I don't know what all those foundations look like, but I know like in the Underhill, you go down into the Underhill and that basement is a rock basement. And in the front, we have moisture problems. And in the back, we don't really have as many moisture problems. Did you have something, Mike?
Oh, well, along those lines, we've talked before about there's that very long stone wall going up Virginia Canyon
Yes.
that probably that could very well be historic.
But if it's not in a, like, it's not in a historic district, like that moves us into the idea that I would love to designate the whole town as a local historic district, but in sections.
Right.
But that is not right where we are just yet.
It's a big leap forward.
Yeah, but there are some, like the stone wall just directly across the street from us at the Masons building.
So we could do a local
something like
historic
that.
designation. And then just under features and improvements, rock walls, retaining walls, view preservation, because I think that's going to come up. Service areas, natural resources, site features on site, and site drainage. So that's what I was thinking when I was looking at who else had them. Between Georgetown and Central City, they pretty much cover a lot of, like, there's somebody that we can look at
Yeah,
for the things that we don't have. I feel really strongly about the third floor, the third story, and the roof, because I think that's going to become more of a question. I also think we have to look at our buildings that are non-contributing on the edges of our districts, because I'm also seeing people who are interested in them. But if they're still part of the district, even if they're non-conforming, it's going to get into like the 35-foot height thing, like we saw with the distillery
Yeah,
question.
the view shed too, like, can you see it from the historic district?
Yes.
yeah, and then just broadly, you had mentioned, the way we could handle buildings that are outside the historic district, but are still directly adjacent and have impacts, especially in view sheds.
I think the view shed and like one block, and you guys tell me what you think, Mike and Jen, one block north, I would like to see some height restrictions.
In the zoning chapter of the municipal code, it actually has a buffer zone that surrounds the historic district.
That needs to be on the map.
Yeah, it does. That needs to be. Because I know planning didn't take that buffer district into account when they approved that hotel on the corner of 14th and Colorado.
Yeah, because that one is essentially, exactly,
35 feet.
or very close.
I am suspicious if that will stay at 35 feet. Well, I'm suspicious right now that it's going to happen. Things seem to be very, very slow.
Yeah. We, maybe outside of the purview of this conversation, but I actually talked to the owner last week.
Are they going to move forward?
They are working on it. They were waiting on some of the bigger projects happening in the city to happen, I guess, like our cable car project, our new garage project, 4 Points, things like that for accommodation of tourists and accommodation of employees, potential employees, things like that, I guess, but I think on all that, and now they're really excited again. So we'll see.
Okay.
And I gave them a timeline of when everything expires and all of that, so they kind of know how much time they have.
Well, I would like to see us work with our buffer zone. How do we strengthen protection in our buffer zone so that the historic district is not surrounded.
Yeah.
By buildings that do not,
Like loom over it.
yeah.
Right, yeah, I know it's protected, of course, on the south because of our city-owned parking lots, but every other side with the school redevelopment eventually happening and
So I want to jump forward just a little bit. If you look at the very end of the design guidelines that you sent, it's on page, a second. Okay, it's on page 43. So it's a map of the historic district. So you can see yes, you can see where it bumps out 16 for the lodge, for the Club Hotel, and then it comes down to 14 and minor. So does that encompass the school?
it looks like the school is on that very north boundary at fourth thing.
Yeah, I think the school's on block 33.
It's just,
Well, it is partially on.
Okay, because
gotcha.
that is going, I know the school is looking at, so if this encompasses that front half of the school, but I thought that, but I thought it only went halfway into block 33.
I believe when you look at I don't have this on screen, but when you look at the zoning map, it only encompasses the library and the hose house.
So what is C2, the red? Oh,
Yeah, yeah, so officially, as part of the historic district zoning district, the library west to the central hose house are part of the historic zoning district. School building, which encompasses this half and this, are not part of the zoning district. And I don't believe they're part of our designation either.
They're not. I do think we need to, because of that, and some of the things that we're seeing along Colorado, where it's also commercially designated. I think that we have to look at our buffer zone.
I've not actually seen that buffer language.
I think it's in the design section towards the end of chapter 21. It's like just one sentence.
The municipal code, Mike?
Yeah, under building.
Municipal Code chapter 21. I think design is right after the parking section in chapter 21.
Yeah, that is right. Yeah, and it does have, let's see, yeah, I see it here actually. It's section 21-205. Section A2, commercial downtown. It says beginning at 17th and extending west to 13th, the Idaho Springs Historic Commercial District is the centerpiece of the community. New developments within a 2-block radius of the outside boundary of the district should build upon and support the architectural features of the district itself. Use of historic district building materials, styles, and designs are strongly encouraged.
And that came into play when they renovated the multi-tenant building at 1800 Anderson. We had some leverage over them in terms of what their design looked like because of that clause.
Right.
Okay, so I think that needs to be front and center in our design review guidelines.
Yeah.
That even though these only focus on the historic district, you need to take this into account if you're within a 2-block buffer zone.
Yeah, and then where it becomes a question. Well, I guess if we add it into the design guidelines for reference to this.
It could be an updated map that just shows more information on it.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones.
And the other,
Because this is not a good map.
No, the map sucks.
the other thing, it'd be good to have a city-wide map, or at least the core of the city, so we can show the locations of the locally designated historic sites as well. That's in some ways you need to know that more so than the address to physically know, oh, that's where it is.
Right. And we do have those maps with the exception of the hot springs on there, but they were created, well after 2007. So certainly are not included in the guidelines, but we have those maps readily available. All I would need to do is update it with anything that's been designated since
Something to show
2021.
The boundary, something to show the buffer.
And something to show our look, because I was looking, so is 804 Colorado Boulevard, is that the pink house with the bumped out like solarium almost? I think that is, let me look.
Which one?
And as a side point, Dylan, have you had a chance to check with the person who did the survey about seeing if you could get their spreadsheet of all the buildings?
We have that, I think.
The spreadsheet?
The one that was in the recommendations for the,
No, I know what I know what he's talking about.
To get it in Excel, so it doesn't have to be the information wouldn't have to be retyped.
Yeah, I, for whatever reason, could not find their contact info when I looked at it, and then I have it on my list to just look in our internal servers, but don't have it yet.
Yeah, because
That's from the National or the Historical Resources Survey.
Because they did a survey
Yeah.
of every building in Idaho Springs, and they told you if it was contributing, if it was historic, when it was from, you know, what level it was, like, was it a 1, 2, or 3 as far as importance? Is that the one you're talking about, Mike?
it's the one that was in the survey that we reviewed last year. The
Yeah.
reason for getting an Excel spreadsheet is if you do that, you can connect the Excel spreadsheet to the GIS mapping. And so it would be relatively easy to then generate a map showing all the sites.
So one other thing, before we get into the design guidelines, one of the things that I made a note of is I think that we need to go through all of our list of federally, state, and designated, and as we update the design guidelines, we need to let all of the building owners know these guidelines have been updated. You are listed as a federally, state, or a locally designated. You know, you are instructed to follow these, or you are, you know, required to follow it. Because I didn't, like, when I saw that 804 was locally designated, I don't know that they know that.
realtors aren't really telling people if they're in the historic district either.
No,
That comes
that
as a surprise
actually,
to people
I
sometimes
talked to
too.
people that bought a building down in the historic district. Realtor didn't tell them. Now, they were fine with it. They have been able to come and talk to us about doing the things they need to do, but they were not told that this was like, I think this needs to be a tab on our website, how to check if your house is a designated landmark.
I think Georgetown has that on their website.
I think we need it too.
It'd be easy to add to any GIS. Like, I know the resources are out there for Queen Creek County, shouldn't be that hard to integrate it.
Well, and we already do mostly have the map up to date. I just, until last week, didn't have the ability to update GIS. And so now I can. So we have everything on there except the hot springs, since that was just designated.
Just
this
designated.
year.
Well, I'm looking at your designated non-contributing, when I looked at it, it's the Cidery, Margie's, the old chocolate, the Alpine Chocolate Shop, the Gilded Fox, the Gold Pan, and the cafe building right over here. And then my question to you would be, and throw this out to the community, is there some way to encourage these owners to maintain the semi-historic that they've got going on, or maybe if they would like to, you know, go back into some history and do something similar. I was really surprised to see that the Cidery wasn't, and that the Gilded Fox wasn't. But like the Gold Pan is a very distinctive look. I would bet that's 50+ years old. I hate to see them pull, particularly because they've done such a nice job of cleaning up the siding, the road siding. Like, I would hate to see them pull that off. Like, are there ways that we can give our non-contributing folks that are in the downtown district incentives to work with historic guidelines? Like, they're not.
Well, they already have to comply with the guidelines. It's just not the specific guidelines that are historic, but because they're in the district, they're subject to, I think, what's called Chapter 3 in the guideline. And Chapter 3 and Chapter 2 are almost identical.
Yes, they are. I was like, am I seeing double?
Yeah, I was kind of questioning my sanity there too.
They would still need to get COA, like the police station building had to. So I would guess if Cidery or the Gold Pan wanted to do something really filed, we would say, no, you can't do that.
Okay.
But if they wanted to.
It wasn't clear to me though, and so I'm like, okay,
Yeah, and what I don't know is, let's say they said, well, we wanted to more closely align with all of the other structures on Minor Street. Be careful not to create history. But I'm sure you could go back and see what that building looked like.
well, the other thing, and I apologize because this would probably fall to you, Dylan. I really would like for us to, and I know the Historical Society has this, create a pictorial history of our building, all of our designated buildings. So that if Shannon once says, hey, I would really like to do something with my building, and I would like to know what the history looks like, we can go and look and see what the pictorial history is.
They do not really have a system in place for that now, because I have been trying to find a picture of my house in historical times, and they have that at this Historical Society, but I'm not really excited about sharing it.
So that might have to be something that comes through the city. I know that Dan has done a lot of work with a lot of the pictures, but I would just, like, that's less than 100 buildings. The problem is, when somebody passes and their estates are being cleaned out, their pictures get dumped on the Historical Society.
Right, they have a lot of digital stuff at the Historical Society too. I know they do. Are they well organized? Are they any kind of organized? I don't know.
But if we could have like a pictorial history of all of our, like 10 pictures that give you different angles, so we can see the windows and the cornices, and, you know, most of the downtown have like a recessed door with forward, like the display windows that sit forward from the door, you know, like so that we can get a better. And we found this, one of the very first COAs that I did was Mountain Prime wanted to do garage doors for their windows. And trying to find, I'm still pretty sure that what I found was their building, but they argued up one side and down another that I had not found the right building, and I was like, So I would like to, I think that would really, since we're in the middle of overhauling, yes, this is a big pain in the neck, but I think it would really help.
Right.
Because I know we have pictorial history. And this might also be a thing to talk to some of the building owners, because I talked to the owner of the cidery, and he found this really huge, long panoramic of the cidery, and it was like from somebody standing where the ice cream shop is, taking a picture of the road, catty corner, so they were getting that building. So you've got not only the front of the building, but the side of the building.
Yeah, that's nice. Maybe that's good for Maria and myself to find out.
I think that, well, then that would be a wonderful project, because it's a laborious project. She would need to talk to Dan at the Historic Center, Historic Society, because that's really his wheelhouse. But then I think if you talk to the business owners and say, hey, guys have any pictures? Because people have stuff that we may not know about.
Bojo's has a ton.
I think folks are proud, should be proud to own a operate historic building. So typically people like to share it.
Oh, well, I know when we talked to the owner of the cidery, he was delighted, and we're like, you need to protect this and put it on, you know, under glass and protect it, and so it doesn't deteriorate, but we would love a copy. So just, those are just my thoughts before we dig into anybody else, Mike, Shannon, any other overarching thoughts that you guys have?
Well, something I think I mentioned at the last meeting, and it sort of is a parallel to the design guidelines, is that there really are 4 different sets of criteria, and somehow getting that better organized into sort of one place would make it much easier for applicants. And those 4 places are, we've got the design guidelines. We also have criteria that's listed in chapter 24. Then that criteria is repeated in the design guidelines document, but there are several more criteria in the design guidelines document that are not in chapter 24. And then the other thing, and this had to do with the way I organized the list of guidelines, there's also something the Park Service National Park Service uses, they call aspects of integrity, which is basically when you submit an application to be on the National Register, it's their list that they use to decide, does this building qualify for being historic or not? And there are sort of references to the integrity aspects, but it's never really drawn out. But that's actually, those are the things that, the aspects are the things you're actually in the end supposed to be trying to protect more than anything else.
That's a good point.
So then just adding that, combining it all into really one is.
It would make it easier for the applicant if it weren't sort of all spread out, if it was sort of put together in one place and there wasn't overlap among them. I think that would be a worthwhile thing to do. That would help us and would help applicants if we made it simpler to understand what's the criteria you have to meet to get approval.
Well, this goes along with your idea of you want to do such and such, here's what you have to do. Like,
right.
Just say it. Here's what you need to do. Here's because you've got a checklist down at the bottom of our design guidelines. But if we just said, if you're going to be renovating, if you're going to be rehabilitating, if you're just going to be, doing maintenance,
right?
What do you have to do?
It's almost like, well, John keeps saying, I think we are very close on the website now. And I can envision like under community development, a big one for historic preservation, and it says like kind of like rehabilitation or like new building or demolition or whatever, different tabs. Click on it, and then it's very clear the resources and where you need to go to get those resources and what you need to do. And some of that maybe is changes to the code and to the guidelines as well. But even just getting it very clearly onto a website that's usable, I think will help me show people where to go instead of.
But also there needs to be, am I a historic building? Am I in the historic district? Like,
yeah.
Put your address in and it will say, yes, you're, historically designated. You're in the historic district. You're not non-contributing.
You're in the buffer.
There's less than 70. If I look at the building, we have 46 and it looks like there's another 15. So there's like 60 buildings, maybe 65 buildings, in addition to what Idaho Springs owns, that are nationally, like some level of designation. So we're not talking a huge number of buildings.
Yeah, right. It's not a huge project to be able to put a resource that says buildings,
It's just a huge project putting it all together.
I think probably there's some sort of table that you can create in the website where you type in your address. It has the list and it if you type like a search bar almost.
Yes.
In where you go Control F in the website and write whatever, and it pops up all the answers. Type it in, nothing pops up. Good.
And you just have to follow building codes. So bringing us back to the comparison of cities, is there anything else that you all highlighted? I'm going to send mine to Dylan, but I highlighted the things that I thought that would be good for us to take a look at, either Georgetown or Central City. Is there anything that you guys feel very strongly about that we haven't talked about?
Well, like I mentioned, I have done an updated table that has the other four communities that were mentioned, which were Breckenridge, Denver, Aspen, and Boulder.
Okay.
So I could send that to Dylan and he could then distribute that.
That'd be awesome.
Sure, yeah.
And that did add more categories, although most of the added categories were under site planning.
Okay.
And those were mostly chosen in some ways, kind of at random for the report, but they do have a lot of, they are well known for having the guidelines. So that's instructive as well, even if they aren't perfect parallels.
No, I think Georgetown and Central Cities are probably our closest. Those are the two cities that I think with a lot of the same things that we do.
And Central City and Denver are both 2022, so they're relatively new.
Okay.
That's what sounds well. I've looked at Denver's a little bit, and they tend to be, compared to ours at least, seem pretty user friendly.
I think Denver has done a really good job from what I saw when I went to History Colorado. They're really trying to find that middle ground between crazy preservation where don't touch the pothole and okay, we all have to live here. How do we preserve this while we're still able to live here?
Right. I will say, I think, in my opinion, or at least my preference is to be more restrictive than a place like Denver because our resources is so much smaller.
Oh, no, I totally fall into your,
Sure,
I think you know from conversations with me that I'm like, absolutely not.
right, certainly.
And Denver began from a pretty weak spot. They've tried to be they've been trying over the years to strengthen what they have, but they started out very weak when they first adopted their historic.
Well, I'm okay, like, I'm okay if people think that we suck, because we have 60 public, maybe 15 more, 15 to 20 more city-owned sites. So that's maybe 80 sites at the most. That's it. We don't have any more unless we start doing some other designating around town. This is a finite resource. So I have no problem being, a little more restrictive. I'm okay with that. Because I also think that we do take into account, just in my experience, and Mike has been on this, Mike and Shane, you guys have been on this almost as long as I have, into account, how much is this going to cost the average?
Right, like if the exact match is going to be onerous, like the club hotel siding thing. An alternative that would be less expensive but still fit in.
Okay, so then let's go on to the design guidelines themselves. I would like to, I'm hoping when we do update this, the very first page that we update, like who was mayor and all that.
Of course, yep, I highlighted it for that reason, just to say that all needs to get updated. The next thing that I highlighted was purpose, kind of introduction, which I think we had talked about updating to really, I don't think it's so too bad, but what we talked about was really talking about why the guidelines are here and how it benefits the city as well as the people who own the building.
But I think that this is like emphasizing that this is not a renewable resource.
Right.
This is a finite resource and it requires maintenance and love and care to keep it as a resource. In a little more official language.
Yes, certainly.
Well, and that's also like I also have in there, we need to let all designated sites know that they are designated and guidelines have been updated and give the appropriate information of who they need to contact. Because I think that's also some of it that people don't know who to go to with questions.
True.
I really like in the last paragraph, these guidelines are intended to direct design alternatives and indicate the range of approaches to yield results that are compatible with the character of Idaho's purpose. Like if you're changing anything, I don't think that one should change.
Sure. So for like the introduction, would it be appropriate for me to just play around with the language?
Yeah.
To talk about how it's a finite resource and all of that.
I think you could just tidy this up a little bit, but I didn't think that this was bad. What do you guys think?
I thought it looked okay. In looking at the other communities, the only topic we really don't have that other communities have is more on architectural styles. We have pictures of several buildings, but we pretty much have all the same. We have the range of topics that other communities have in the front part before they get to the actual guidelines.
Would you recommend to have a little more discussion on architectural styles?
Yeah, it's kind of important to do that, and to some extent we can draw on the survey that was done because she did identify the architectural style if she could. And so we'd be able to, and since she has specific addresses, we could then we could then include a picture for each of the best example we could find of each of the architectural styles. And the same thing with the commercial buildings is that there are several styles of architectural buildings, like the library is definitely not 19th century Victorian. And for that matter, the building that's being moved is actually as a warehouse structure is also a different type of use, or was originally a different type of use as a warehouse structure. So yes, I would say I think we could expand it by just getting pictures for each of the styles that we know of.
Okay.
And we could take a look at the same thing on Minor Street to see if there are any distinctive historic styles. There's a few post period of significance buildings that we would not need an example of, but in looking at those buildings, we may find several different styles actually.
Right.
Like there's a difference between late 19th and early 20th century commercial architecture.
Yeah, we don't really distinguish between that now.
The other topic that might be worth doing after we get through this is at the end is to having something at the very beginning that says how to use these guidelines.
Ooh, that's good.
I've done codes before where that's after you open the cover of the document, that's the first page you see is how to use this code.
Also, would it be out of place to have just a brief history of Idaho Springs? Nothing that in depth, just maybe a paragraph in there. This is the history of the city.
I think it'd be worthwhile making it longer because that's, it's a very short section that covers history and architecture.
Right. Yeah, something more general about the history and then cover the architecture in more detail later.
Well, it does contextualize kind of why have this, right?
Yeah.
And without the history, none of these buildings are historic in some ways.
Yeah, it just launches very abruptly in, and having a how-to guide and a history would help together a little better.
Darn, I thought I had that survey. I was just looking for it, and I can't find it either in my.
Oh, like
it was in an HPRC packet from I think October
2023, or was it October 2022?
Let me see what I've got here.
I want to say it was 2022.
I think it is 2022.
It was finalized in 2020. Or that's when the date is on it.
We finalized it like in January, I think, of last year. But the last version I've got is from I think October 2022.
Yeah, I have the PDF of it. I don't have the spreadsheet as far as I can find quite yet, but I will.
Well, actually, if you have a PDF, you can convert a PDF into an Excel file. It doesn't work as well as Word, but that's always a possibility if you have the PDF.
Right, that's true.
Well, we had a special meeting on the 4th of October. Let's see. Because I do think that would really help because it would tell people exactly what their house is.
Yeah. I think it might even be on our website already.
Because that thing was actually pretty awesome.
Yeah. On looking at your own house, on sharing it with others who live in town.
Guess maybe it was after the website sort of blocked that it was finalized, but I actually have a hard copy downstairs, but I have that document via PDF if you'd like it.
Oh yeah, I would. I think I had it in a printed version, but I know it was in the packet. just don't see it. So I think that would be really important to include in that.
So like on the website?
Yeah,
or-
so that everybody, like, what is my house? And it pulls this thing up and it tells you, even if you're not part of a historic district, it tells you what style your house is, you know, how important is it in Idaho Springs architectural history. Yes, that's it right there. Where'd you find that, Missy?
It's downloads on my phone from previous packet.
Yeah, so
That's from October.
Yeah, how is it? Yeah, so like they've got, you know, late Victorian, Edwardian, Foursquare, Edwardian, minimal traditional, modern movements, 918 minor is modern movements, integrity is medium. You know, so that actually is, thank you, Shannon.
yeah, my house says that it's the Edwardian.
Well, my old house says that it's part of the BB Hotel, and I don't think that was right.
Is that 1901?
That's 1901. No, across from me, 346 or 345, 19th came from the ends of the BB Hotel. And those are two pieces that were put together.
You can tell if you look at it closely.
Yeah, it's not like, you can't fold that thing in half and have it like be two sides of the same, like they're different.
Mine says it has no style.
You have no style? So I think Mike is right that that needs to be included.
Yeah.
Okay, moving into, I like Mike's idea too, that we need to, I like Shannon's idea that maybe a little more history of Idaho Springs.
Yeah, just like a brief paragraph.
And then why is this important? Why do we do this? And I like Mike's idea too, that we expand a little on the style based, and then link it to that spreadsheet. You know, like modern movement. I didn't know what that was until I read this. And we may need to take some more pictures. These are pretty good pictures.
That's a resource we have in spades, is the ability to take pictures.
Maybe some of this is just update how to understand the guidelines, particularly if you're going to put different linkable things in there.
It would probably be good to have almost like internet version with all the links. And then like a paper copy that doesn't have all the links, that way they don't break in a couple of years and then have link to it, or the format's weird, but we could make you very web friendly.
I would like them to be web friendly. People aren't printing off these things. Maria's gonna be like, oh my God, I didn't have anything to do and now I have tons to do. On page 5, I like your idea, your tradition of if the term shall appears in a design guideline, compliance is required. And I like your change on should, that if the term should appears in a design guideline, compliance is strongly encouraged, but may not be not required or may not be required.
Should be made, not be required.
Because I like that. I think that is stronger than is not required, but may not be, which allows HPRC the ability to decide should this be required or not. What do you guys think?
That's some good wiggle room there.
Well, I do think wiggle room is important, you know, to a degree.
Yeah, we don't want to be really black and white. Yeah, have some flexibility in there.
Right.
Well, we've talked before about the idea of how many shoulds do we want to recommend changing to shalls?
A lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, and some of them maybe aren't, maybe some of it should be a should, but
No, there's some that I think that you highlighted.
ones that I changed to shall, I thought we should definitely be shalls in my opinion, but ones that I just highlighted in yellow, I thought, sure.
I'm about half and half on your highlight questions. Where it says step 6 on page 6, preliminary review optional, I think that they need to meet with the city planner before they, and I think the preliminary review should be, I think that should be strongly encouraged.
That's actually exactly what I wrote. Optional, though strongly encouraged. And we could just strike out optional if that's less.
I like strongly encouraged, but I also think they should talk with you, like, they need to talk with you before they come talk with us.
Must be like a step 5, well, step 6A.
Well, because what it does is if you get to step 5 and you talk to the city planner and they want to build 4 stories right next to Bojo's, the city planner is going to say no.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So it stops it right in the tracks, and they don't have to do, like, as you go down, you know, further below, you don't have to do a lot of this stuff because you've talked to the city planner. So somewhere before you do a preliminary review with HPRC, I think they should have to talk to the city planner.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, and you guys please chime in, I think that the projects, whether they've gone forward or not, they've had greater success by talking to you guys and then come and talking to us.
That makes sense to have that in there.
That could be added as like, prior to the meeting. I mean, you would hope that someone, before they prepare anything, would talk to me, but then once they get to a point where they have conceptual, you say, okay, these conceptuals are pretty good, let's take it to a pre.
So actually something that's probably needed is if someone's coming in and applying for a building permit, probably it needs to be checked. The addresses need to be checked. And if it's one of the addresses, then there should be another sheet of paper that says, that briefly explains about getting a COA.
Good call, Mike. I like that. Because I just think if we streamline this and make this more, like, there's greater clarity, I think it makes it easier.
I've got a lot of places in here where it says link for places in the online document where you can just get the information.
Do you want to share your copy with Dylan so he can?
Oh
see
yeah,
it?
you can have this. This is paper written all over it, but it's to be given away.
Well, in step 7, prepare and submit a complete packet. You replace should with shall, and I'm a big yes on that. Like, don't come to me with a general idea. Like, I'm not gonna tell you, yes. Like, I feel like it's a waste of time if they don't give us concepts of what they're looking for, what they're trying to
Good
do.
pictures, good drawings.
You know, relatively, like, I mean, architectural drawings are expensive. If this isn't gonna play out, I'd hate to like cost them money, but you're gonna have to put a little time and effort into.
Yeah, they could draw it without it being like an official architectural
Yes.
rendering and cost tons of money.
But yeah, where they stopped from submitting a building permit to go back to that other one before they even apply.
Yeah, if they're flagged as
Oh.
a designated property, you can't get a building permit until you deal with the COA.
Right, like you can't even submit it, you say, sorry. Yeah, sure, but the problem there, they're still annoyed when you say, hey, I can't sign off on this until you go through the process, because that's when you catch it otherwise is once safe built's already
At least
reviewed
it'll be
it for
an
a month or
informed
something.
annoying.
Yeah.
Do we, and I don't know if this needs to happen, but do we need to send a letter to the realtors that operate in this county that they need to alert their clients to design guidelines? Or do we just say, hey, design guidelines are updated, here is the link, please share this with your clients?
Give them a map. And that
And a
list.
map!
Then dig out maps and make it work.
I know, well, then no wonder that map made you itch, because you were like, oh, no. I see you, I saw your physical recoil.
Yeah, I could see some updating.
In the preliminary review, I like the review package shall contain, because like the scaled elevations with dimensions, I can't tell you if we're gonna approve this if we don't have, like, that should not be a suggestion, that should be a must-have. And I like an application for approval, review package should contain the following, I like shall. You know, a detailed list of the type of exterior materials and finished proposes. Because that's one of my, like, we've had problems with that. Where people have not submitted their finishes and their materials. And then there's been all kinds of back and forthing over, well, what about this? Well, no, come to me in the beginning with what you think you're going to use. Because I don't want to spend, like, we spent a year on one project. just because of materials and finished products.
Yeah, because once it gets to a point where we've given a COA, lost the ability, well, in some ways, lost the ability to easily say that doesn't work.
I also think, and I don't know where to put this, and I keep pushing this, and I don't know how, we need to talk to Carmen about punitive measures. If you break the COA, if you don't do changes in the COA because we've also had where changes in the COA were done by the applicant and they were given a stop work order, there needs to be a punitive measure. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this. I really feel very strongly that the value of land in Clear Creek and particularly Idaho Springs is just going up. Even as it's slowing, it's still going up. We don't have a lot of land where you can have commercial. So and so you can see it in the prices in downtown. We're going to see people that maybe are really interested in the commercial and the historic is secondary. I don't want to see people coming to us with, well, I'm going to ask for forgiveness.
Right.
No, you're not going to ask for forgiveness. You're going to pay the fines and you're going to do the things to put yourself back into compliance.
Give us some teeth for sure.
I want
Make
some teeth.
people-
I've been asking for teeth for
Where
over
people
a year.
apply.
I think the stop work order, which is a delay, and then requiring that it be built according to the guidelines, that's a sufficient penalty in and of itself. When you sort of look at construction is very much time sensitive. So just stopping them to begin with is costing them money.
So maybe a stop work order and you can't start work until you have an updated
Yes.
approval from the planner.
Yes, because that means you'd have to wait several weeks at least for HPRC to meet.
That's actually a good one. Yeah, I like that. Like, I just want there to, because that is a punitive measure that have a monetary cost to it.
It's a low key fine.
Yeah,
It is a fun because you're having to delay.
they're having to reschedule.
But what if they don't
contractors.
follow the stop work order? There has to be, like, we have to have something behind that
Well,
if they just.
That's in the building code, and the city has steps that it can take if someone does not follow a stop work order.
As I go down into page 8, and it says, important note, the certificate of appropriateness does not constitute a building permit. For building permits must be obtained in blah, blah. I think there needs to be something in there that if applicant deviates from the COA as it is obtained, it must come to HPRC to get approval on the deviation.
Right.
Like everyone word that, like, they have to come to you and you know, because I think we did things where we actually did an email vote. It was run I think it was run by Jonathan or Jared, where we did an email vote just to amend a COA. Am I remembering that wrong, Mike? Am I?
I don't remember doing something by email.
Because generally we can't, but if it's a COA and like, I think that there are ways that we can do this so that we can make it quick or you know what it was? I know it was. We actually had like an emergency meeting. We just did
What some communities do is you have this sort of hierarchy of big projects, middle projects, little projects, and you require different kind of review for little projects. In other words, if it's a minor change, it could be done just by the chair or the vice chair.
I would be okay with that. How would you feel about that, Mike, since you and I both sit in those right now?
As long as we have well spelled out rules and as long as we do it in some sort of public fashion, I'm okay with it.
Would that be, you think, for like changes to the approved COA that are
I think
minor?
that's changes to a COA that are minor that fall under like small projects or, you know.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
I think,
say, oh, this material we were moving for, like, doesn't exist, like, they can't get it for 2 years.
yeah, but also I think they need to go to the city planner and that needs to be city planner's discretion.
Sure.
about, can I send this to the chair slash vice chair, or do we need to ask if PRC can roll in and do a meeting?
And the idea is that it's the staff person and it's a member of the HPRC, so it's not one person making the decision.
I'm with you on that one. I'm big on that. At the bottom of that page, small project exceptions. That's my thing is who is the building official? And we've talked about that. Like,
Yeah.
that has got to be clarified.
Yeah,
Or city's authorization. Those are the two that I keep seeing.
I think clarifying it to say something like approved by the city's authorized. Well, it's an authorization, just say may be approved by the city planner.
The city planner and or a member of HPRC. That way it gives us the double oversight. So it's not just one person. In the criteria on number 4, and you guys, if you have something as we're going through this, please, chime in.
Sort of the hierarchy I've seen is you have full board, then below that you have a hearing officer, which is the chair or vice chair. And at the bottom level is just staff. In other words, this is something staff can approve. They don't need a sign off from someone from the board. And those are referred to as like insubstantial changes. In other words, really minor.
So if you think, I think though anything beyond insubstantial should at least go to the city staff and like the hearing, just a small hearing.
Yeah.
Just to avoid person.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I could see how with like the small project like signs, if they come and say, hey, we're just if you change out this bracket because it's rusted through, you say, oh, it's basically like for like.
Yeah, you
Like
just,
that'd be one where it's like, all right, staff can.
that's pretty insubstantial.
Yeah, but something bigger where you're like, well, I was going to use.
And we could take a look at the other communities and see what they consider to be insubstantial as well.
Solar panels, are they considered small projects since they're not?
Like I think at Georgetown, we've got 4 items. I think Georgetown has like 8 items on their insubstantial list.
Okay, hang on to the solar project. The proposed project must not damage adjoining properties. That's in criteria on page 9. That kind of goes along with what Jeremy was saying about safety. Like I think if we can, that's pretty vague.
Yeah.
I think if we can expand upon that. And then to Jeremy's point about how do we do with fire safety, if you were updating the fire safety, because and I'll just share this with you guys, Mike and Shanna. Jeremy's our assistant fire chief. He sits on council. And he said that Idaho Springs probably has the best fire protected downtown area of anywhere in the county because a lot of these buildings have updated. So maybe there's something in here that, if you're going to update the safety, the fire safety, the alarm systems, you need to go through the building codes. Because that just does, unless it's affecting the interior walls, which are also exterior walls for other buildings, that is not our purview.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's us overstepping.
Putting sprinkler system, things like that. And it's not exterior.
But I do think must not damage adjoining properties deserves a little expansion.
What Central City says, and I think Breckenridge says the same thing, new system and code compliance in existing buildings, introducing new electrical, plumbing, heating, and ventilating systems into historic buildings shall be planned and executed such that historic materials are not damaged or obscured.
That's good.
Then that would allow them to do exterior work, potentially to add operative cooling, let's say, to deal with moisture or something, who knows? But it can't obscure the historic features.
I like that.
That's a good.
Well, I will leave it to you to look at how to expand on, you can't hurt your neighbor's wall that you share.
Right, that sounds good to me.
Well, because I was worried when I was hearing that they were drilling down in the Opera House, like, I've heard some rumblings from other city officials that there is a concern on that wall that they share with, who do they share with, Canyon Trading?
Yeah,
Like, is this gonna hurt the Canyon Trading shared wall?
right.
I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered it there until they started talking about water filling in, and that would have huge impacts. I need to go run and grab my charger for this,
Okay,
so back in 30 seconds.
okay, we'll
Sorry.
take a quick break.
Like 5 minutes and I don't do it.
No, that's not good. And guys, I'm trying to like roll through each page where he's done stuff, so if there's anything when we're on that page, please stop and say, hey, what about such and such? Because I spent the couple of days just going through all of his suggestions. I like a lot of the shouts.
Yeah.
I also think that they're meeting with oh, Mike, did you say something?
No,
I think that they are meeting with the distillery people
Oh,
this week.
are they gonna stay there or go somewhere else?
My understanding is that they're trying to encourage them from the height restriction thing to move a little further east.
Hmm.
And I said, well, what if they did the tasting room and the shop and, you know, the storage here? And they did the rick house, which is where they need the,
Yeah, that's what they need the height for.
where they need the
barrels
height, and put
stuff.
that down like
Hmm.
further east. Cause I think they want that creek side.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, like,
It's nice.
from a financial, like from a commercial standpoint, I think
if
it's an asset.
if it wasn't going to complicate things, I think having them on the Argo property would be an ideal complementary use.
Oh, you mean up at the top?
No, at the bottom, they have plenty of land at the bottom.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of parking there and like,
They're building that gondola and everything too.
yeah, but the problem is a lot of that is built on tailings. And so, and you can't really do a whole lot of disturbing of the tailings, and my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that with us being looked at as a Superfund site again, like we really don't want to disturb the tailings.
Okay,
Sorry, we were just chit chatting.
that's great.
So we are on page 11, part 2, we're in the part 2s. Mike is right. So do we need to change, like, do we need to integrate part 2 and part 3? Because I was like, didn't I just read this?
I think an introductory paragraph, at least, if we keep them the same, because someone could say, okay, well, I'm not contributing, I'm non-contributing, they could skip to that, so
Yeah,
it's not a bad idea to keep it there, but
yeah,
we need some kind of introductory paragraph saying, okay, this is what's going on, this is what a non-contributing structure is.
well, and maybe what we need to do is actually see what the differences are, like compare them side by side, which I didn't really do in full, because it's very similar, but there are some
Okay.
differences, and then you could almost just either kind of add the introduction so people know which one to look at.
Okay,
or somehow separate it out so that it's all the same, but then you say, if you have a non-contributing structure, you additionally look at these things that are actually different, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a tremendous amount of overlap, and even in the non-contributing section, it even, unintentionally refers to it as being a historic building. So you can tell a lot of what was in chapter 2 was just copied and pasted into
Yeah.
chapter 3.
So maybe if we do, and like maybe in chapter 2, it needs to be guidelines for rehabilitation, restoration, or renovation, contributing, non-contributing. Like they can be in the same chapter.
I think it would be better to have them together, to have the same topic in the same chapter. In other words, if you were an applicant, you want to know about windows, and then if it's a historic window, then it just needs to be pointed out. If it's a historic window, then here's this additional requirement.
But I like Shannon's idea. This chapter covers both contributing and non-contributing. Please read carefully to make sure which one you are.
Right, and then have an intro that says, contributing buildings are all of these, and they meet these characteristics, et cetera, and then non-contributing, we could even just say, we have that list.
Yeah, we
Just
do.
refer to that list and say,
I like that. Like, I like Mike's idea that it's all in the same place, and then there's no ambiguity. Are you contributing or are you non-contributing? But I do think having them separate, and I think having introduction, here are the contributing buildings, here are the non-contributing.
And then the only nuance with that I can think of are buildings that are contributing but have non-contributing additions.
They address that in here, though.
They do, and I think we just need to write that in probably to say, as opposed to it being black or white, you're contributing or not, like, like the Opera House had that addition from whatever with vinyl siding and all
Yeah,
that.
like 1980 or something.
And so like that's part of the building now, but it's not a contributing portion of that building. And so if they had come in and said, we just want to demo that, bring it back to original, we'd allow that. I don't, if it didn't impact the rest of the district and the building, et cetera. So, but yeah, maybe we can just combine them, but I'd like to just look at
What the differences are?
if there are any areas that have substantial differences, maybe then we need to consider whether that's how that integrates into the component chapter.
Okay, I would, well, I will tell you on this page, page 11, I agree with all of your shoulds,
I had started to do that to try and do a comparison between the two. I didn't get very far, but I had started that.
And your should on there about vertical and horizontal emphasis, I'm okay with the should, because I don't think that like having some flexibility with that aspect is bad. What do you guys think?
Well, the vertical is kind of important for Minor Street, but then if we get out to having other buildings outside of the district or other districts, then there may be more of a reason to not be vertical. But the nature of your downtown commercial buildings is that they were vertically oriented.
So we could have something like buildings should generally have a vertical emphasis, particularly in the downtown Minor Street area.
I think you've got the one, the place across the street from Tommy Knockers. You could probably say that does not have a vertical orientation. I think it used to be a hotel, I think.
Yeah, the senior center. Yeah. It's 2 stories, but you're right. It's as wide as it is tall. It's actually probably wider than it is tall.
And the way you've got, I think, the elements across the front, it feels more horizontal than it does vertical.
That's true.
That's true.
Well, but also if we're changing should to be may not be required.
And we could still, yeah. I mean, that was the thing that even if we didn't change any of the shoulds to shalls, like it just makes sense to say, we'll probably still require it, but there's a chance we will.
I like your change for should, because I feel like that leaves less gray area.
Yeah.
Where people can say, well, it says should, I don't have to.
Right. But there's probably, some areas like this where you're like, okay, well, historically it was wider, and so we wouldn't require it.
I didn't have anything else on those pages. You all?
And if there's anything, of course, additional to these, this was like I said, my very first, bare minimum going.
I'm sending this back to you.
Oh, that's good.
I just have places where, like 2B, add pictures of examples to, help people kind of sort out what to do.
So maybe some more pictures.
Yeah,
Need to
pictures,
happen.
examples, like a style that would be misleading about the history of Idaho Springs. So maybe something brutalist, like in the historic district, would be not a great idea.
It should be not too difficult actually to find pictures that relate to the guidelines. The NAPC has like 200 sets of guidelines on their website, so it'd be very easy to find someone who's already done a sketch and just copy it.
Yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
Well, and I think it makes it, once we have our website fully functional, and then this is on the website, it can be pretty similar to our municipal code website, I think, in some ways, where we can have the links and people could like, okay, what does this mean with the large facade design being divided into segments? And then they click, it shows up a picture from the NAPC or somewhere else that we've selected. the city. So, you know, obviously if someone's reading the hard copy, it wouldn't help them that much, but maybe we have like a reference at the end with all the photos.
Okay, I think that would be good.
I think some of these, I mean, it's not, historic preservation is something that I haven't dealt with that much, but is really interesting and really important to a lot of communities. So I think it would be helpful for city administration to get more involved in that for her perspective.
Well, but I also think it's important, like, we can do so much, but it's important for, we have a point person on city staff, who this is the person that, you know, knows this and handles this, because
Right.
there is a difference from a commission telling you, yes, no, you can do this, you can't, and that, like, there are differences in the hierarchy, like,
Yeah.
you know, when Mike was talking about the hierarchy, like, city staff can make a decision because it's not a big deal, but when people are talking to you, you're our first line.
Right, and I think I generally, or most planners should generally, if they've read the document, be able to say, I really don't think this fits with this. And, you know, in some ways, like the discussion on the distillery, like when it mostly fits it in a lot of ways, but there's one or two things that clearly height, mass, things like that, that are very incongruous with the guidelines. It's like, is there a way forward? You know, it's not something.
There's not a way forward for that.
If someone's
house, I don't think.
pushing hard to say, well, it says should, you know, whatever, they're like, I want this pre-meeting. Then you say, okay.
Well, but
let's do
also
it.
in our last COA, we had some discussions about shoulds versus shalls. Like those became some contention. And I would like to, so on page 13, all of your highlighted, I was good with all your shalls, but all your highlighted shoulds, I'm like, why are those not shalls? I would be okay with those being shalls. What do you guys think?
Like, get rid of the word shall not be added, it's not an original.
To the feature of that structure, because that's creating history.
Because it's more specific and.
Like that was my thought, like if I'm wrong, please, you know.
I would agree, because in this case we are talking about contributing structures, and it's really where you're trying to keep it intact, and not introduce elements that were never there in the first place.
And that's also replacement of missing elements in section 5. New materials should match, and I think new materials shall match.
Yeah. Some of these, I'm not sure why
Oh no, I looked at it and I was going off of, okay, there was a question.
yeah. Like I would say, I think for 5C, where it says the design should be substantiated by physical or evidence, like, you know, we're not always going to have that necessarily, right?
I'm okay with that one staying a should. It could go to a shall, you know, because you could add if no pictorial evidence is available, you know, but I think what I was thinking when I wrote shall for that one was I would really like people to put the effort into what did this look like. I do think though on our end, that means we have to help them find that pictorial evidence.
And that can be part of the project too.
Like I don't think this is all entirely on them. I think the city bears responsibility for having the things available for people.
Yeah, I think changing all three of those makes sense.
Okay, page 14.
Add access to those pictures so people know that's not good.
Oh, so yes.
Yeah, the X's aren't, oh, this picture sucks, it's don't do these things in the picture. So I just add a little note there to try to make that clear, but just visually.
No, I agree with you because people, like, if you're going to do a picture, it needs to be very clear what the picture is. On page 14, why I was interested as to why you did shoulds, but I think if we do shoulds meaning may not be required, I could be okay. And same thing with shutters. Shutters should be sized to match windows.
I think it's shall, because that's one of the most noticeable errors on houses that have shutters that clearly don't work.
Okay, then you'll get no complaint from me. I'll put a shall in there.
I think the metal roof, I just don't know whether, I'm just not an expert on metal roofs and whether.
I think number one should be shall.
The non-reflective finish,
Yeah. Those can get incredibly bright if they're reflective.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that almost feels like, it goes, like the reasons for that go well beyond just historic guidelines into like public safety and well-being in some ways. To not have it be incredibly shiny.
Are we good with the other three shoulds?
I prefer shall, but should's okay.
No, you know what, if you are the expert amongst all of us as far as this is concerned, if you think a shall is better, I am fine with that.
I mean, I think there's probably an argument to be made that basically all of the should be shalls. And we could almost just remove the should definition completely, but I didn't, some of these where I'm not as well versed, I didn't want to just do it, I guess. So I think changing those would be fine as well. There's not a whole lot of places, especially in the historic district, that really would have a metal roof or, they're mostly flat roofs, so.
And then Shannon's on page 15. I like that, Shannon. I didn't think of that, but that's a good
Yeah,
call.
that's good. I'll put those pictures.
I think,
On the page ahead.
that's okay, on page 16, I think all of these shoulds could be shalls. That was my opinion.
In addition, I would rather just strike out for the windows, unusually shaped windows, feel like strike that out altogether for, because people could put in an accent that is huge. You could just like, I don't know, there's just too much ambiguity.
Are we
there.
still on the window page 15? Oh, you're on 16. 16. Oh, the new opening, okay.
Yeah.
Like the unusually.
H,
Yeah,
H4.
Yeah.
Just remove that.
because we're still in contributing buildings, so I think that's fair.
Right. It could maybe be, I struck it out for the next section too, but it could be left there, just not being non-contributing. But this one I think should be.
I agree.
Else shells, and then, I don't know, I added like a couple of things there, like, all buildings which face the street shall have well-defined front entrance, then added unless the building historically did not meet a feature or something to that effect, I mean, maybe that we don't need like qualifiers like that at all, but I see someone getting confused and saying, well, I don't have an entrance that faces like a main entrance, like it's.
I don't think the qualifier is bad. I think if you have, this is my thought on this, like, we've been looking at these for years and they mostly make sense to us, but when I first started this, I was like, oh my God. And so I can imagine that someone is just walking into this is overwhelming, so if we can,
Yeah, sure.
a half a sentence clears it up a little.
And that was the impetus for a lot of my, like, provide examples or provide pictures, kind of things, just to make it a little more user-friendly to understand.
Oh, yeah, page 17, I'm good with your shall changes, and I actually feel like your should be shalls as well.
For like the brick lane pattern.
Well, the brick lane pattern shall match that of the historic chimney being replaced, because I actually had to do a little reading on chimneys, because not everybody still uses the chimney, but it does, if it is part of like the sight line and the building, the chimney is important. So even if you don't use it, keep the chimney. Just, and if you're going to like, you have to match the, if they've got a brick pattern, they've got to match the brick pattern. And I was debating, Mike, you have to chime in on this, like, you don't want to put something in and like make it look like it's always been there, but old brick and new brick look very different.
Well, it's also a case of if you're talking about the existing historic building, you want it to match. If you're putting an addition onto the historic building, you want to be able to tell it's an addition and you're
Yeah.
not trying to make it identical.
That's true.
Shannon, if you want to keep rolling all through.
And then the other one I had on here that I wasn't sure about was about the building. If the building is painted historically, it should remain painted, including all trim. Happy to change it to shall, but I wonder if there's a scenario where unpainted brick still historically works, since we otherwise don't
It's
deal.
painting brick is usually not a good idea.
It's not, but what if it was painted?
Like, already has paint on it?
Yeah,
Because I could see, we don't generally regulate
paint.
paint colors. So if they said, well, we just want to remove the paint and have it unpainted.
I think we want to any buildings that are not any brick buildings that are not painted, it'd be better if they stayed that way.
But what if it's a brick building that was painted? Because there are some brick buildings downtown that are painted.
Well, you could make an argument if they were painted during the historic period, then the appropriate thing would be to allow them to be painted again.
Okay.
But would we require them to be painted again, or it should maybe smart to say, maybe there's a case where they can put the paint and it would be good.
The thing of it, a lot of it comes down to the condition of the brick. You have to be careful what you do to brick because once you put the paint on, it becomes very difficult to ever to get it off without damaging the brick.
There's moisture issues there too. So that's in the wood siding. Oh no, that's wood siding was painted. Where is it?
What is under wood? Well, wood shall remain.
Yeah, I think the wood should be shall.
I thought that's a brick, but it's
There's masonry section,
Yes, we
a
haven't
little
got.
bit later on, yeah.
And then on page 18.
Yeah.
So I figured the first two shoulds I'm good with. They could be shalls. I'm okay with that too. The one that I was interested in and I needed to ask for clarification, new coatings of stucco should not be applied. And I'm not familiar enough with stucco maintenance to know if we should not coat, if we should say should or shall on that one. I don't know that we have many stucco buildings, but I think cidery is stucco. Even though cidery is non-conforming, cidery is stucco. Who else is stucco? This building actually is
our
stucco.
small bit of base.
I feel like there's some stucco, if it has not been taken care of, it like creates a lot of problems if you do a shall on this one, I think.
I think maybe because it does say where a covering of stucco has taken on historic significance, consider repairing it, but that new coatings should not be applied. So I guess, is that trying to say that you can't add stucco now to a building that doesn't have it? Or are you saying like if you have stucco and it needs to be replaced, you should consider a different treatment versus you shall consider it? Like if the cidery stucco started to fall away and they're like, well, we want to put a whole new thing of stucco, would we say you can't? Or would we say, okay, that stucco?
I think in that like if we're looking at our buildings, and same thing as we're looking at our little piece here, I think should is okay there. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think should is okay. I think we don't want to encourage stucco, but if someone's already got stucco, it's probably better to allow that to be repaired.
But I think I think this might take a little, because really G is talking about stucco that has historic significance, and G1 is talking about putting new stucco on.
Right.
And it's not.
Where it wasn't before.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so I think G needs to be where periodically cleaning it and repairs as necessary. One, new coating of stucco that have not been historically there, or so, like something like that. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. Something could be added at the end there.
would be like stucco where that has not, new stucco
That is not taken,
changed.
that is not, does not have historic significance.
Historic significance.
That can be, shall not be applied. That could be a shall.
Yeah, because then it would allow for historically significant stucco to be repaired.
Yeah, but you can't go, oh, I have a brick building, I'm gonna slap some stucco on it. We're not gonna let that happen.
Yeah.
I think, this is my opinion, I think the paint section is challenging because do not allow frequent repainting. Where is it? Maybe it's in the other section, because it also says that the layers of paint, though, do take on historical significance. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
But also, with the muted color used as a background, like we don't control paint, but I don't want to see a bright green hue that is not a historically accurate. I mean, but there are, if you look at some of the painted ladies in Victorian architecture, those bright hues are accurate.
right.
But they probably weren't in Idaho Springs.
Okay,
Probably not.
So then where it's like 13D, using the historic color scheme is encouraged, we would say better. Because then it says we won't review actual color selection, but consider these things. So we could say,
well, it says generally one muted color is used in Idaho Springs history generally. So I like the idea, I like Mike's idea of this is Idaho, we're dealing with Idaho Springs history.
so yes, we should require that in some ways, right? That it's like one muted color for the background and then accent colors that can be brighter. You know, it's like you see in a lot of the residential houses that's white, but then it has like a bright blue and a yellow bunting or what have you, or whatever those details are called.
Just try to
Or-
prevent someone from painting like the main part of their house, like
Turquoise
bright
blue.
green or that.
The HPRC will not review extra color selections, however, a historic color scheme shall be used.
That's better.
So, right, so instead of using the historic color scheme as encouraged, we would say using the historic color scheme as required.
Is required.
And then you can delete, and you say, instead of however the historic scheme is not to be used, you could say like, historic color scheme includes the following.
Okay, and I don't need to see actual colors because I've seen some really wonderful color schemes that would not necessarily be my first choice.
Yeah,
But one muted color and then one or two colors to accent, can be brighter.
right.
I do think that should be required because, like, my only exception would be pink. You did see pink,
Sure.
And we have seen pink used between like the three major cities where we see this, Central City and Georgetown, Idaho Springs, to great success.
Don't know, I think the pink here at least, mostly the main paint is houses, right? If not like.
Not the
like
downtown.
someone's not painting their front facade, like pink. The downtown.
But they could do like cream with a bright pink and purple and I would totally be
Those
okay with
accents.
that as accents.
Right.
Because it's a
Trim would be
muted
okay.
color with bright pink and purple. And
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I don't know.
Just not the main color.
so yeah, maybe.
What's kind of typical if it's a house with wood siding, the wood siding would be one color and then there would be two different accent colors at most. Often it would just be one accent color. But like, for example, the front door might be one color. The trim around windows might be a different color. But that's kind of the way those paint schemes usually go, is one for the siding or the main wall and up to two accent colors.
Oh, I'm bad because my old house, I did 3 accent colors. Because I had fish scale,
Yeah,
but I had fish scale and then I had square scale and then I had alligator scale. So I had three different kinds of scale.
And that's a more elaborate detail than many of the houses have. So, yeah, when you have that kind of a detail, that would make sense to have allow more colors.
I think it looks fabulous. I mean, housing is fabulous.
Okay,
So now we're in masonry. Masonry, I like the shalls.
and I think Ricker's done that was not being historically shall not be painted.
Yes, shall not be painted.
For any circumstance.
I don't know about what it should be.
So, what do you think, Mike? Yeah, because I think D 14D shall not be painted. That
Yeah,
needs to be shall.
absolutely.
But mortar joints should be cleared with hand tools.
I'm sorry, where are you now?
On masonry, which is section 14, and then I'm down in
So on
Yeah.
page 19. Okay.
yeah, it's on page 19, 14C2. Dylan has a highlighted should in there. Mortar joints should be cleared with hand tools. Or shall be cleaned with hand tools. I heard the sigh.
Um,
The only thing I could. see
let me.
that-
Are the bricks really soft? The historic bricks in Idaho Springs really soft?
If they're not, I live, I know you guys have probably all seen it. I live on 10th in Colorado, and across from me, there is a house that is Idaho Springs brick. It has been painted, but now it's all shabby chic looking because the paint is peeling, but the bricks are too soft. So if they were not fired up here, they are too soft.
A lot of them were, yeah.
If they were fired in Denver and came up here, it is questionable. So I think that should be
I think a shall.
shall.
Yeah, the only, I guess at some point in the future, they could have technological improvements that make it so that other tools could be useful, but for now, I don't know that that exists.
I think maybe not tonight, but that code section that we've talked about for code changes, we probably want to also look at technology changes that occur as something in concert with the code changes about how to consider that, because there's quite a bit that's happening in terms of the technology.
Yeah,
But we've already seen, like with the Jacobs house, we've already seen what happens when the bricks are not stable enough because they were not fired
Yeah.
up.
The Park Service in their technical briefs would basically say, do it by hand.
Okay,
It was the second technical brief they ever wrote was how to do mortar in brick buildings.
I think shall is good for right now,
yep,
barring any new technology.
next page.
Page 20, existing, okay, so I actually had a bunch of questions. Existing additions, such changes may have developed significance in their own right, and this, I think this significance shall, I think that should be a shall.
And also the should above that should be a shall.
Yeah, they both. should
Yeah.
be.
For B, should we put that 50 years guideline in there, possibly? Historically significant.
Or I'd like to do an additional one that says. Like,
I think so, add the year, because 50 year, it like, there is that, I think it's kind of gray. Oh, and it's later in here, but it talks about how our period of significance initially was 1860 to 1910. And then it moved, I've always been told it was 1880 to 1920, but I think maybe we need to say 1860 to 1910. Not that I think we have a lot of buildings that are pre-1870.
Well, the nice thing about 1910 is we have 1907 Sanborn maps. So they're
Yes.
going to be pretty reliable through the end of the through 1910.
But our period,
It'd be very easy to find how many buildings actually were built between 1907 and 1910.
but do we need to expand it from 1860 to 1920?
You can hurt add the 20 years at the,
Yeah, I don't know that we have that many buildings because a lot of them, if you look at the early pictures.
We probably need to just check and see what's been approved as the period of significance. In other words, there's a document somewhere that says officially it's this date to this date. It's sort of, that's kind of not up to us alone, is that it would have to be something that the state would probably want to look at if we were to change our period.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is at the end of the document, it mentions that our original period of significance was 1860 to 1910. And then at some point, we stretched that out to 1920, 1880 to 1920. And because so many of the buildings were just wood structures, they either were knocked down or they were built over. I think most of them were knocked down. I don't know that we have buildings that are pre-1870 anymore. I think the Jacobs House was 1860s, maybe early 1870s. I don't remember. And that was one of our older buildings. I don't know that we have older buildings that are listed, like.
right,
Um,
not sure.
Because the oldest buildings would have been log cabins and most log buildings, and those are virtually all gone.
And then under existing accessory structures, 17A, it says, if an existing accessory structure dates from the city's period of significance, then its preservation is encouraged. If it's part of the period of significance, I think that needs to be required.
Required. Yeah. Accessory doesn't mean it should be.
And then if an accessory structure does not date from the period of significance, then its preservation is optional. Does it need to be encouraged?
Think
It'll
it'll
be better than optional.
I think encouraged is like, and I'm thinking about when we looked at the hot springs, like we debated what was appropriate to hang on to and what we were like, yeah, we'd be okay, like.
Yeah, right. That's where you have to have the COA and then we realize, okay, contribute to the building in some way, improving it, harm the building, etc.
And I think that gets to where the rationale would be is if it acquired significance after the period of significance. Because if it didn't, there's no reason to say you can't remove it if it has no historic significance, unless it has acquired it.
Yeah, like the pool area acquired significance, even though it was, I think, built outside of our period of significance.
Yeah, the actual plastic stuff.
It still acquired significance.
Right, it's pretty well known at this point, you know, it's like an iconic feature.
Anything else on that page, guys?
It's,
Page 20, I did 21, I mean, under 19, A, fences and walls. When fences are used, they shall be of wood, iron, or stone, or plant materials, which I'm good with. These should not exceed 4 feet in the front yard. So you mean 4 feet from the street line?
That's a height.
Oh,
And I'm
4
wondering
feet
whether
behind,
we
yeah.
want to consider whether that's appropriate or not. It might be fine, but I figured,
well, it's not clear. It's not very clear.
but I'm wondering,
Because it says 4 feet into the front yard.
yeah.
So you're saying 4 feet in the yard, like 4 feet high, or 4 feet. I wasn't sure.
It's basically a front yard fence is 4 feet, and I mean that's just sort of a common thing. You have low fences in front of a house. You have the taller fences behind the house.
And our regular municipal code would say if you're in a front setback, you can only be 4 feet,
We
but
do 4 feet high, so it's clear,
yeah,
but it's not
the
a 4
height
feet
of
back,
4
like
feet.
setback.
Yeah, then in the side yards or rear, they'd still be allowed to be 7 per code, so I highlighted that mostly. Any reason we wouldn't want a 4 foot tall fence.
And then on the very last line, lighting should always be downcast and shielded.
Yeah, that's where it says like low wattage systems are recommended and like it should be shielded, I would say.
I would say site lighting shall be downcast and shielded.
Yeah. And that low wattage, is required, I would say.
I had
Yes.
examples of wattages, like below which wattage.
Yeah. Because we don't have a very good,
Can you typically see stars at night in Idaho Springs?
Yes, you
yeah, I
can.
can see it from my
That's
house.
that's a major reason for wanting it to be downcast and shielded.
Yeah.
You're trying to avoid light pollution.
And I also know that Idaho Springs would like to be, from city council side, it would like to be a dark site community. So I think with us wanting to be
Yeah.
more dark site than not, I think downcast and shielded is important.
Yeah, where that should, first be done is our own streetlights maybe then, but that's a problem because that's important for safety also. But I think, you know, a broader conversation outside of historic preservation would be whether we want to do a stronger lighting code specifically for commercial. I think when you do it for residential, I've found it's a huge headache because then neighbors will complain about their next door neighbor because there's one light that they don't like or something, and then it's like this huge headache for staff to enforce and say, oh, well, you know, the bulb's too bright or what have you, but for like the East End, for example, you could definitely not allow some huge lit up, you know, backlit sign that's super bright. But that's a broader conversation. I think making this required instead of recommended is smart.
On page 22, I was okay with all of your shalls. And I actually felt like your shoulds could be shalls.
Sure.
Right down to alley entrances, because we had that discussion with the Opera House, the alley door, you know.
Yeah.
I would agree with the comment.
I'm thinking of concrete. I know of a few patios that are concrete in close proximity to this building. Wondering how they got approved.
If they were pre-1988, because the historic, the historic district was started and the application process started in 84 and it was approved by 86 and then HPRC came into being in 88.
Right, so if you had like a concrete patio, at that time, obviously.
And then
But
It's
The
probably
first-
difficult to get around concrete, unfortunately. I mean, your other material is basically is brick or stone, which is a lot more expensive.
maybe we could keep that as a should with our new definition of should and look at it by a case basis.
I would say, but no asphalt.
well, we could say we avoided less.
Or just say patios and driveways are necessary, asphalt shall
Or
be
just-
avoided.
Or just leave it as it is.
Well, I suppose,
I'm with you in that I don't like the asphalt.
But if they have concrete already, then
yeah. Concrete now can be kind of nice if you.
Yeah.
Maybe you should avoid it as much as practicable or something where you strengthen.
As much as
it.
practical.
Cause then if someone's like, I can't, I have to have this thing, you know, like our requirement is that the driveway be paved in asphalt, like with asphalt. Like that is our parking requirements, is that you pave it. So if you did something like say the senior center, which has off-street parking, right, they have to pave it.
Maybe we could leave that one as should. Again, I think strengthening our should is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it makes it a lot, it means it may not be required, not that it is not required.
Right, and it probably will still be required, but may not. And then, yeah, all the deck ones change to shalls.
Yes. And the wind generators,
Oh, yeah,
and the
The
solar,
air conditioning units.
yeah, the air conditioning.
That's no. Then on the next page, I'd change that to shall as well.
Mechanical equipment.
That one, yeah, and then moving even onto the sign. shall
Yeah,
be
I think the
developed.
sign shall, and sign COAs, like, we've done a bunch of those, and They're not a big deal.
I thought it was more of a gray area where it didn't have to come to us necessarily. This is something that we were discussing not that
Yeah.
long ago.
Well, we have the small projects of signs, but also
Yeah.
like the signs for this one, I'm thinking of like when they put the signs on Minor Street, when they put the signs on the buildings, like the signs that hang out above the clear story. So it is clear story. They're right above there and they all have to be in the same line and they have a very specific setup and design of what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that they should, it shall.
I didn't have any challenges on the rest of 23.
So that's it for section 2, chapter 2.
Yes.
I don't know if we need to go through all of chapters, part 3, given that it's so similar.
I generally felt like most of these shoulds could be shalls, but if you would like to compare those and then come back to us with it,
If there's a few that.
If there's
I
a
have
few?
questions on, like,
how do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I don't think we need to go through it separately because it'd be worthwhile to look at it first as to how much redundancy is already there.
Yeah,
A lot.
and I will
A lot.
do that as like my first step is just to see how much of it is just the exact same thing.
I think the other thing, and tomorrow I can send out to Dylan the updated spreadsheet, would be maybe to look at the updated spreadsheet and see, are there any sections we don't have that we'd like to add?
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because then that'll take longer, of course, to draft. Well, we can, borrow a lot of it from.
Yeah, all of it exists in someone else's code among the 6 cities.
Again, no need to reinvent the wheel here.
Agreed.
There's enough branches on this tree without adding to it. So that brings us to chapter 4, demolition. My only, like the should in initial consideration needs to be a shall, that needs to come to the city building official, and I think that needs to be the city planner.
Well, maybe we say city building official and city planner. Because I think technically,
Who's the city building official?
I think it's technically safe built, whoever's still like banned from safe built.
Okay,
Because he is he does all the building code stuff, so I guess it would be him. So maybe we say city building official and the city planner, because it says they're addressing the city zoning code, so it doesn't make sense for it to be the building official if it's zoning code question, the zoning is planning. But there's certainly questions that, are building related that could go to the building.
and then on 36, I just had that reference measurements should be included. I think that shall be included. I think if you're gonna demolish something, you need to be very clear on your reference measurements.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Then we get to the next, which is guidelines for demolition or relocation. It talks about buildings should be located on their second orientation similar to, maybe it can be shall since it's.
That one actually has a
similar
big
to-
red shall on it for me.
Yeah. Suppose if there's like site specific context that need it to be oriented slightly different, as long as it's still similar.
Well, we ran into that with the warehouse structure that was being relocated. Aren't they rotating at 180 degrees?
Yes, but I don't know that they're putting it there anymore. Like,
Yeah, I don't think it.
I think that the location has been changed. So I
Okay.
don't think that the rotation is going to happen. And they're only taking like the front half of that building. But you're right, they were gonna rotate it 180 to put it behind the Quest building. I don't know that it's gonna go there anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I have something in there for 5 rehabilitation plan on, I guess it's page 36. Just going a little bit more detail about mothballs. I know what it means. I have a pretty good idea, but
I
that
would
might,
agree,
that might confuse folks. Like,
and with the original site, I think that should also be a shall, like shall commence within 60 days. 60 days is enough time to get your bits in order.
Well, and I'm sure if there's a valid reason why they cannot start construction within 60 days, we would grant that.
Well, and that you would make that a condition on the COA anyway.
But we should also, I think we should have it clear in here.
Yeah.
It's not should, it's a
That's what
shall.
you're doing unless there's some reason why we'd approve it as a condition to say, if you said, they say we have to, I don't know why, but.
So it's interesting, I think they just included this for like shock value, that last picture under impact of demolition or removal on surrounding properties. I really wish they would come to us and be like, hey, we're ready to do some work, because I think this could be presented in a much nicer way that shows the history of the building.
I actually think that's kind of cool. seeing
Yeah,
into the bathroom cabinet and
I
stuff.
like seeing it, but it's not, basically you can tell we just took a sledgehammer and did a lot of this.
It's pretty untidy around the edges.
Yes, I don't think we need to change anything. I just, if we ever see this kind of project again, I would really, like, if they ever came to us, I would love to have, like, talk to them about, hey man, how can we like help you find grants or something to, because I love seeing what used to be there.
Right.
I just wish it was.
It certainly speaks to the history of what happened to that building, but it doesn't do so in a very way that's respectful to the intent of the historic district, probably.
Cause I think that's really our one big, huge building where you see like the scar. Like the not healed well scar. But I like it, I like seeing what used to be there, I just wish that
That's a
they.
bathroom cabinet, look at that. Like, different room, different paint.
The only other thing was the integrity, on page 40, results when it's sufficient, okay. Those are both shoulds, I think those could be shalls.
Agreed. Yeah. And
And then I have the period of significance, if you look down on page 41, that's where it talks about
oh, yeah.
1860 to 1910. So I think we need to clarify, find out when it was designated differently.
Yeah, actually, what you're saying on integrity is if you don't say shall, if you don't have those elements that are described there, it's no longer considered a historic building.
Right. It's true. It seems like when these were drafted in 2007, they meant should as shall, but they just didn't say it as such. And so that's why it's like everywhere, but they left it way too broad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think though this was a huge undertaking, so.
Yeah.
But I would like to clear this up. Idaho Springs, the original period of significance is 1860 to 1910.
Yeah.
The current, the expanded, like, because I don't want someone saying, well, my building was 1915 and I want to change this or that. And I'm like, well, actually it's 1920.
Yeah. So it's nice.
Yes.
Even though we all say it's 1920 and no one has ever been.
And you'll find even if it's a 1925 building, when you go through chapter 3, you'll see almost all of those historic requirements are in chapter 20 or in chapter 3 as well.
Yeah, so even if it's not in the period of significance, I guess it would play a role if it wasn't in the historic district, but being in the historic district.
And I would like to see, along with Shannon, I would like to see this map updated, pretty please,
Well,
with a cherry on top.
that will be the easiest thing to do, except for I just need to add the hot springs to it, and then it'll be basically
Okay.
done. And
So-
that's already in the comprehensive plan, a map that
Oh, good.
shows, here's the local, here's the state, here's the national, here's the specific boundary for the historic district. And I think it's only missing.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see this being two maps, one sort of this basic scale, and then one that's a little bit larger, and that could be locally designated historic sites. I feel like appendix B and C need separate maps.
Yeah. Yeah, we should do that, but yeah,
To the address.
Here's like our comprehensive plan historic district maps.
Much better,
Which
yeah, I
is a
like
lot
that,
better,
yeah,
because
that's kind of what I was thinking, two different scales.
I'll rotate it.
Okay, thank you.
You can see everything you need to on that, so.
Like this has like national, state, local.
Oh, see, this is much better,
Yeah,
much
so
better.
I think all I need to do to this map from the comprehensive plan, sorry, Mike, that you can't see it, but
That's okay.
hot springs and then make sure there's no other one, but it would also be interesting to have, like with the GIS, like Mike mentioned, like a map like this on the website where if you click 804 Colorado Boulevard, it like pops up with like the designation document, whether it was an ordinance or resolution or whatever, and then also like
I think that would
the
be great.
placard that talks about like, this building is this.
That could eventually be a web map.
Yeah,
Because
Yeah, I think-
you can do that through Esri. You can upload a map to their site.
yeah, then you just link to that and it's, you click it pops up, etc. It's
Yeah, it would pop up and it would like give you 6 facts about that piece of property.
Idaho Springs have their own GIS person, or do you guys have to go through Clear Creek County to do that?
well, I guess it's me.
You have the GIS
We
guy.
just got our subscription back. It was lapsed for a few months and it was hard to get it back and then it's hard to download it, but now it's on this computer. And we have pretty good base maps. It's just.
The other thing, if you haven't seen it, I think next year, Esri stops supporting the 2D maps. You have to go to 3D.
Yeah, and they're eventually going to like an all cloud-based model. Yeah. And which is probably good in a lot of ways, but if you already have the desktop model and you're used to it, it's very.
You know, here's one of your map people that could like help you out with some of that GIS.
Yes. Yeah, I would be happy to help with any of that.
One other thing, and Dylan, you might already have heard about this, is that the National APA Conference is coming to Denver next year. So Idaho Springs might want to do something because there's a lot that could be pointed out.
It's true.
In terms of like a mobile tour.
Very
Planning. Oh.
Planning Association. So we have a state conference every year, which I'll probably go to this year. It's like October, first week of October or something like that. But yeah, the Nationals coming to Denver next year.
I think in May, I think.
Oh, I think we should,
Yeah.
you should totally submit.
Yeah, it would be cool to do something.
I would I would support you on that one. Or help you put together a presentation or.
With all the stuff we're doing, it's.
Yeah,
Here, all this, a lot at play.
I can see either Idaho Springs doing something or maybe even doing something jointly with Georgetown and Central City and have them here have them in Idaho Springs for lunchtime.
Yeah, do like a tour.
An all day tour, like a morning in Central City.
They have for
They
the,
come to Idaho Springs and they go to Georgetown in the afternoon.
And then, they might be the operative model.
I wish they would, but they're.
But yeah, no, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I would support you in that if you needed,
Yeah, if we
bodies
could
or-
do like a historic tour, I think people would really like that.
Well, there's an awful lot of stuff. There's Argo, there's the old football field, and look at the city's done several housing projects, including what's going to happen on the football field.
Yeah,
and Habitat for Humanity,
Habitat, we've
and
got a.
Riverside,
soon-to-be Senior housing.
the senior
project.
housing, what we've done with the project support over in the
Right.
hotel.
So yeah, we can easily do a housing overlay, and maybe by then we'll have the MJHA. We can talk about that. There's a lot of
And-
options.
And actually, I don't know if you saw, in the Denver Gazette, there was a big story about the Virginian Canyon bike trail.
Yeah, I did see that.
We have a lot going on.
Yeah, there's so much for sale or ready to be redeveloped on the east end. I have to think that's gonna be snapped up.
Oh,
in
did
the
you see
near
that little
future.
cute turquoise house? That thing is a cutie but hootie. It's right next to the Columbine. And then like
oh,
Lalonde is before Mountain Woodworks and Yards and stuff. And it's got a little turquoise shed in the front and then the house sits back.
It's for sale, right?
It's for sale. 2-1.
On the market.
But we all look, if you're a historic person, like
Oh, I
you
know.
go look at all the old houses. Okay, so I think we are
It's not that
good.
bad of a price, really, compared to what some.
What is it, 400 something?
450, which is, and it's already pending, but
And it's only been on there for like 3 days.
Yeah,
No wonder, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
a
Because
cheap
four
price for
fifty
here.
is cheap for here.
yeah, at this point, and it looks like it's in good shape.
It's
like
not
the
in bad
floors
shape.
there. So I think, is that all for now, or?
I think that's it. Are we missing
Yeah,
anything?
that's cool.
Mike, Shannon?
No, I think that's quite a bit of, we got quite a bit done.
We
Yeah.
did, like,
Yeah.
we did a good job with
Gives me a lot to work on in the next month.
and you're like, Maria, come sit down.
Is she the intern? Is like your
Yeah,
intern?
She's the best and brightest
She's
intern.
the best and brightest, it's like a fellowship, she does, she's not a planner, she's a like city administration of some kind, public
Okay.
administration masters, I think. But,
She came to Saving Places with us and really, like, she's like, wow,
Oh, yes,
got
I
it.
remember
She's-
meeting
she's
her, now
very
you mention
sharp.
that.
Yeah.
very
she's
sharp.
cool.
yeah, and I think she's looking for projects, so like, I gave her kind of like, hey, when you get the chance, start looking over the comprehensive plan and checking off what goals we've already achieved and maybe what's still out there. But I think if we could say, hey, let's start working on, some of these several pages of things that I've written out, they give her like kind of the interesting stuff that's not just going through and changing the document. I think she'd like that.
Well, but like finding that, that spreadsheet and,
Yeah, and then doing more of that comparison and taking language and starting to put it in and saying, this is what Georgetown uses in Central City, how do we condense that into something that works for our context?
I think so. All right, then it is, what is it? 8:23, I will close our work session and say thank you very much to both of you, because I know this was, labor intensive, and, thank you, Dylan, for getting us started with everything.
Sure, well, I think by next month's meeting, or I don't know if we wanna just plan to have another work session next month regardless, or if we wanna make it dependent on if there's a COA or some other discussion, but
I think it just even a short work session regardless of COA, just so that we can hammer this out, because then it has to go to council, correct?
yes.
And it will also go to planning commission before council?
Well, it does technically, I don't believe that, well, if there's amendments to municipal code, probably. If it's just the guidance document, then I don't think technically we have to take it to planning commission, but we still could as like to keep them updated.
I don't think it would be bad, to take it to planning commission, even if they don't have to officially approve it.
Yeah,
Here is the guidelines, here's what we are doing.
maybe likes that I do that at planning, just as a update. But yeah, by next month, I think would have the time to implement all the actual into the document that we've had, work on new language.
Maybe too with Maria, have her like looking at Shannon's document. And see like, where do we need to, as we're building this into the website, where do we need to link to other documents? Like,
Right,
here's this, and here's where we need to link to this document.
Or a link to contractors that are going to do this kind of work. I
right.
know we've talked about having that before.
Yeah, because it would be easy to, if we create the how-to guides and we create like a resource guides that say, here's people in the area, here's professionals, here's training links. Like we can update on those on the website easily, and as long as people are, obviously the link isn't gonna work on hard copy, but anyone who's reviewing it in an app
Right.
online, as long as we keep those links updated, which is easy.
Looked at this more of like someone's gonna read this online, because you're right, people aren't printing out stuff all that much anymore.
Well, I drag my two different devices to all my meetings because I don't want to have paper anymore. I'm drowning in paper. So, and I feel like a lot of people feel the same way, like we have these, 6-foot filing cabinets of crap that you have to save for 7 years or whatever. So what, if I can do it in, save it in the cloud and do it as digital, I'd much rather do that.
Well, everything's good enough how you can make notes digitally, it's just as good as writing them on paper at time, if
All of
you're-
mine, I'm gonna send mine to you. All of mine are, like, all of my notes are digital.
Perfect, and I can take that if you like. and
Oh, yeah.
Copy
You can go
if
ahead
you
and
want it
have
back,
Yeah.
or,
I have another copy. I was a writing tutor for a lot of years and it was mostly paper, so.
of course, well, sometimes I've had previous bosses who would print out my staff reports and mark them up in pencil. They give it to me and say, implement all these changes, and I'd have to go into the document. It's fun. It's kind of fun to.
I think we're good then, so,
Perfect.
but I do think next month, just even in the work sessions, we
Yep.
can go through it.
Yeah, because it might not, I think we'll probably still need to workshop some of the bigger additions and changes and things like that.
And that means by hopefully September, we can get this to council and planning and whoever else it needs to go to. Because I would like these updated by the end of the year,
Yeah,
like officially adopted.
Sounds feasible.
I think it is, and then we get the notice out to, you know, all of the folks that have, have designated properties and I honestly, I think we have to talk to the real estate agents and say, it is your obligation to let these folks know, so
yeah,
here's the new guidelines.
right, and all they need to do is give them like, if we had like, it'd be easy once we do all this to have like a 1 or 2 page, like quick fact sheet that we can just create that's kind of publishable and just give to them and say, here's the links, here's the contacts and basic info you need to know, and it can just go with other disclosures and stuff like that. But.
Yeah, but as long as we supply it, there's no, like, I won't run into people who were saying to me, Lisa, I didn't know I was a historic building. And I was like, you bought a building in a nationally designated downtown, how did you not? And they're like, well, the real estate, and I think it's a case of, you don't know what you don't know.
Well, one of the things that can be done would actually be to do a mailing to all the property owners. It isn't that many properties.
No, and again, like 60 properties, because like 15 to 20 are owned by the city, so the city doesn't.
One of the things in one place we worked, it was very simple. It was a legal size sheet of paper that would be folded over twice. And it was just a brief explanation to hand out to people explaining what we were doing. This had to do with, we were updating our survey at the time, but it's the same type of idea, is just creating a very simple, inexpensive handout type of thing that could even be mailed without even putting it in an envelope. Because you could use one of the folds as being the address side.
Yeah, you could. Does that give you everything you need?
I think so, yeah. I should have something for us by July 16th, which will be the next scheduled meeting.
Well, and thank you guys. Thank you both for taking the time to do this. I know this is a longer than normal meeting, but
We got a lot done though.
we did get a lot done. Like, I feel I was concerned. I'm like, oh, this might take a while.
But yeah, no, I think obviously there's a much larger to-do list of things with the how-to guides and those type of items that we put into like a website format, or something where people could easily access it. But as far as getting the guidelines to a point where we're comfortable moving forward for the next few years, or I think it's looking pretty good with some of these changes. I'll lead through all the guidelines.
I think it also like protects us with what we've been seeing over the last year or so of folks that are buying some of these bigger properties and these bigger plots and have ideas for like big ideas that are millions of dollars. I think I think we have to be very clear, because I don't think we're gonna see anything but those for a while.
Right.
I mean, that one building that with the that used to be the dentist building, isn't that still for sale for like 1.8 or something?
I think so. Yeah, it's expensive.
The apartment's super cute, like that apartment is freaking awesome. And they've got a deck out back and all the things and.
Well, if I had $1.8 million, maybe I'd buy it and turn it into a bike shop or something. Something that, and then you live above it.
You know, and I'm telling you, like I keep saying, we have to do a bike ballet.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's not being heard, but I'm like, if people are bringing I didn't realize people have $10,000 bikes, but whatever.
You get crazy.
If they're bringing $10,000 bikes, that thing needs to be chained to their leg, or it needs to be somewhere where they feel safe, or they're not going to stay.
Yeah, where they know it's secure. Because yeah, I don't have nearly, even a tenth of that expensive of a bike, but I still make sure it's double locked if I leave it on my car for more than 10 minutes, just because, if I lose my bike, it's only worth $100, but that's still $100.
So I think we have to figure out where around here, and I'm like, is the gyro place still open? Do they ever open?
They're never open. The person who runs it, who ran it passed away.
I actually used to go there when it opened. It was really
I
good.
thought it was really good. I never went, and now it's been closed basically since I've lived here, so.
But we need to find somewhere where someone's willing to run a bike valet.
I thought that the place below, where the Ology Emporium's going now, would have been perfect.
The what emporium?
It's a new like science and, educational sort of gift shop that it's going where, like, I think it's Feral before, that like. gift shop
Oh,
that's at the
okay,
bottom of the
fair.
Majestic.
Oh,
I thought that would have been a good spot because it had that back room that's kind of separated, you can store bikes there and have like a little commercial shop. But now it's gonna be a gift shop.
Well, I think though that might be something that the city looks into, like, do we build a shed where people can be out of the elements and we can fit 100 bikes? And,
Right.
you know, we help, like,
Yeah, I'm wondering if long-term we can build that into the plans for the mobility hub.
I
Like
think-
have a secure bike storage where you lock, like,
right
you
in
know,
center
it's
town,
covered
be convenient.
and there's like racks, you see it all over Europe, you know. Every apartment complex has a whole floor, it's inside of a parking garage, they have a bike garage. You could easily put space for however many bikes you would think like that. That's a few years out.
no, but I think it's something we have to look at now.
Yeah,
Because they're opening it this summer. And if we want to capitalize on those people, like maybe we set up a tent at the back of the visitor center, like along that side,
yeah,
and we hire somebody.
right. Or if we could do it at the Sunshine Cafe building. I mean, I know it's.
Oh.
right
Self-storage
now.
units, it's gonna be a parking lot, doesn't the
There
city
are
own it now?
self-storage units.
Yeah, just
Oh.
don't destroy that part, and you have plenty of storage.
Well, Mike, I don't know if you wanna stick around much longer. Now I'm not talking to Hprc, but I'm happy to keep this running.
I think
Okay.
are you sticking around, Mike?
Probably not.
Yeah, I was
Okay,
gonna just end the,
Unless you need me for something.
no,
I think we're all good.
thank you, sir. Thank you for that, for your spreadsheet. That was really helpful.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Perfect, all right, well then I'll just end the meeting and Mike, have a great night and we